Welcome back. Welcome back to the course Privacy and Security in Online Social Media. This is VK Part 3. So I hope you're enjoying the class. 2/3 of the class is almost done. So we just have week 10, 11, and 12. So 10, 11, 12. So I'm also hoping that if there are any content that you would like to discuss beyond what we have already seen in the class until now, feel free to post it on Discourse. I will also try and post a Discourse message asking for any other topics that you think you would like to discuss in the class, or me to actually come and talk to you about it. All of that, if it's possible, please share. Let's continue. So this part, what we are going to do is we are going to actually look at the idea called anonymization in super level details. Before we get there, we also wanted to actually touch upon some aspects of how do we stay safe online, right? How do we stay safe on social media? How do you, what are the general tips? Meaning I also know content which can be generated only for how to stay safe online, probably for a few hours, right? My intent here is that some high level bits that one can follow to be safe online. This is a course that you're taking on privacy and security in online social media. So you should also be able to say to others what are the general tips that one should look at. Should location data be considered as personal? That's another question, because it is also necessary to get some services. For example, if the location is not shared, it's going to be hard to actually find some personalized ads that is given to you. Or if your location cannot be shared, how do I get a Uber cab to you, right? So those kind of issues are there. But with location being shared, is it necessary for the business to run, right? For a calendar app, right, is location needed? Right? And is location a personal data? Should it be considered as a personal data under, if you remember, the PDP bill that we talked about last part, which is last part we did fully about privacy laws. So PDP is questioning whether location data should be personal. Another one is, it's a very traditional old security problems that we end up having because of not being able to not patching your services, updating your operating system, updating the applications that you're using, all of that, right? So please keep a watch on these updates that show up. Please make sure that you update your operating system very regularly, your devices, your browser, all of that, right? Let's get to you a small list of ways to protect your privacy. Here is one list that, two slides at a very, very high level. I put some points. The first one is don't share your live location or daily routines. There are like enormous number of cases, because people have actually cases in terms of criminal activity, because people have shared their daily routines online. So please be careful of not daily routines. Like there was an incident where a mother shared her daughter's school-going daily activity, and there was a kidnapping of the kid after some time. Next is don't share identification numbers, right? So do not put your Aadhaar card number, photograph on Twitter, do not put your passport, photograph on Facebook, or on Insta saying that, oh, I'm actually on a vacation, here is my boarding pass with the passport open on it, take a picture and do a post about it. Share less in the about section. Of course, I mean, you can question what is less and what is more, maybe very, very subjective. But as much as possible, you want to reduce the information that you're giving, but you also want to give information which people will use for something. For example, in my case, in my about section, probably you will find that it is Prof. Giri, then IIT Hyderabad, and my alumni connections and ACM connections. I mean, I think these are things that you will anyway find it online if you just search for my name. I've not given away anything more specific, but giving enough that when somebody shows up on my profile, if they're a CMU alumni, they're going to see that, oh, it's a CMU alumni, okay, and things like that. Or somebody looking for a professor connection in IIT Hyderabad, they're going to land in my Twitter handle, and then they say that, oh, there's a professor at IIT Hyderabad, right? So those kind of things you want, but you also want to avoid, for example, I don't post geotag location. Sometimes my post itself will reveal that it's actually the place that I'm visiting, but geotag post I generally avoid. Only accept connections requests from people whom you know. I think this is possible to follow, but you want to also make sure that you also, this is connected to this, right? So don't share identifiable information, don't share live location. If you don't have anybody that you don't know in your network, then it's even if you share, it's not going to be that big a problem. But the biggest worry is that today, if you see, most of us have a large proportion of people whom we probably don't know in our network. Insta, probably some of you are very careful in terms of protecting who gets to see it, but let's take in LinkedIn kind of a network, probably you are getting connected with people you may not even know. This is age-old thing, create strong, unique passwords, keep changing it regularly. Use two-factor authentication wherever available, wherever possible, try and make it two-factor authentication. Watch your back when out in public. I think I've had incidences where people peep into your phone when you're actually typing the PIN number, right? For a UPI transaction, I'm paying some vendor, I scan, and then I'm typing my PIN. There's always somebody curious about what the PIN is. If you're in a supermarket, usually the person standing next to you on the queue is curious about your PIN or the cell number, right? When you go to the supermarket, they're asking you for, oh, so what's your cell number? That's the way that they identify the customer. And I've had incidences where people are curious about what the number that we are saying. Pay close attention to security alert emails. You do get those emails even now. Be aware of it. Delete expired social media accounts. I think many of you would have Facebook accounts created, and it must be lying there. You may not be using it. So if you think that it's not required, just go delete the account. Don't ignore software updates, which I said before. Tighten your profile. So as much as possible, take a look at the, meaning we did this in the earlier weeks, right? Details about privacy settings in every social media. I'm hoping that you must have seen something that you would want to change, and you went and changed it also. Force log out of unrecognized devices. This is also a common thing, right? I've seen on campus also, where you go to a public machine and you will see that some account is logged in there at some point in time. Right. So small tip, nothing exhaustive. That's why in both the slides, if you see this huge dot, make sure that you are catching up with all these kind of ways to protect yourself from social media. Definitely for the networks that you're using very regularly, and for the networks that you think that needs more protection, try and be a little bit more careful. Okay, so now that we know the data, we have understood what data is coming, what is PII, what's publicly available data. We also, if you remember, we also discussed about how companies can share data with others. In one slide, I think in earlier part of the weeks, I actually listed down k-anonymity, L-diversity, t-closeness, differential privacy in the slides. That's exactly what we are going to do for this part, which is delve into each of the methods and see how it works, what it is, how is it helpful, how can you actually implement it, all of that. What is anonymization, right? So the dictionary word of anonymization would be, I want to send some, let's take table. I have a table, I want to give it to you. This is me, this is you. I don't want you to know all the details that I am actually giving it to you, but I want you to do some analysis of this data and give it back to me. Right? I want to avoid telling you, let's take if this one column was cell number. I want to just remove that cell number and give it to you. If the task does not require the cell number, it's okay. But remember, if the task requires the cell number, then it may be harder, right? Let's take if this was address. And the task was to find out how many people are actually ordering medicine. Let's take if this is 1 mg analysis, 1 mg data that we have, and we have to find out from which locations people are ordering more number of times a particular type of medicine. Then you need the address, right? So you cannot remove it. Right? So that idea of sharing information and having a protection to share the information is what anonymization is. If you go back to week 1 or week 2, you'll realize we talked about when we were defining privacy, we talked about different states of privacy, right? Solitude, intimacy. In that, we also mentioned anonymization. Some examples that we will see before we delve into the methods where anonymization become very popular, and the word, techniques, solutions, public talking about anonymity has become more and more prevalent. This one is American Online. This used to be a company which provided internet, and they also had a search which they made public. That's this data. What they gave out was this is what they did. Essentially, American Online wanted to share data for researchers, for public to analyze and look at some patterns that users are coming to their platform, what searches are they doing, what kind of users are coming to their platform. But it kind of backfired. This AOL search data leak is one of the 101 dumbest moment in business. If you just do a search for 101 dumbest moment in business, you will see this AOL search data leak as one of them. What happened, right? On October 4th, 2006, I was in my grad school when this was happening, and we were actually taking classes on privacy during this time. And this was happening right in front of us when we were taking classes on privacy. So on 4th August of 2006, 657,000 users data with 20 million search keywords for 3 months were posted online. This is what the data is, which is that data was given for 657,000 users, 20 million search keywords. $20 million search keywords, which is the keywords that 657,000 people would have actually searched for the month of May till March till May. Interestingly, within 3 days, this data was removed. Why it got removed? Because people started using this data and re-identifying people in the data set. And so AWOL did not identify the users. PII of users were in the data. So this is where the question, right, which is you can remove some columns. You would think that column like, let's take the shirt that you wear or the places that you eat breakfast or your best hotels that you eat in your city may not be used to re-identify who you are, but it just depends on how smart, what all other data that we can get to connect to the data and re-identify you. New York Times re-identified users cross-referencing other sources, including phone book listing. So that's the key. I'm hoping that some of you in the class will be curious to know how these kind of things are done, and even try out if it's possible in the publicly available data that you get access to. Right? Take a data of your city, take a data of your state that is anonymized, and see whether you can re-identify some people on the data. Super cool problems. It will be super nice if, as part of this course, if you picked up some ideas about how to actually do that. AOL acknowledged the mistake. Many copies of the data was distributed. Of course, right, this is in 3 days. Let's take, even if it was max of 72 hours, people could have made copies of it, stored it within themselves, and then made public later. All of that could have happened, right? AOL from their website removed it, but still the data could be public somewhere. Right. So what really happened? This is the New York Times article itself, and let me walk you through the article, some parts of it to just give you a sense of what the journalist ended up doing, what kind of re-identification that really happened. This AOL incident made one important contribution for this AOL incident, and then there's also Netflix incident next we'll talk about, is for companies to think about, look, we need to protect user data. Look, we need to take care of potential risks of data collection, potential risk of storing the data, and personal information. Right. These words, these topics, these concepts became more and more common within the companies to make sure that this is taken care of. So here is the article. The article was titled, "A Face is Exposed for AOL Searcher number 4417749. You will see this number appearing again and again in the article. But interestingly, they went and actually re-identified this person. This person also consented into using her name and details, so you will see her details also as part of the article. Buried in a list of 20 million. Let's quickly read some parts of it. I've even kept only some parts of the article. Buried in a list of 20 million web search queries collected by AOL and recently released on the internet is user X. The number was assigned by the company to protect searchers' anonymity, but it was not much of a shield, right? So this is what the company did. Company basically replaced her name to this number, hoping that, look, I've replaced the name, so you can't really re-identify this person. That was the idea. Number was assigned by the company to protect searches anonymity. Okay. Number X conducted hundreds of searches over a 3-month period on the topics ranging from numfinger, 60 single men to dog that urinates on everything. Right? A 3-month period is the March to May that we are talking about. And search by search, click by click, the identity of AOL user became easier to discern. There are queries for landscapers in Lilburn, GA, several people with the last name Arnold, and homes sold in Shadow Lake Subdivision, some county, Georgia. So people, I think some broader searches may be very hard to narrow down who's doing the search. Let's take biryani in Hyderabad, right? Best biryani in Hyderabad. It's or good idlis in Chennai. Right? So these are probably very hard to re-identify, but the searches that you start doing narrow probably will be harder. For example, when I was preparing for the slides, I did a search. I did some searches. One of the searches was looking at one of the methods, right? T-closeness or L diversity, how that is implemented. That's going to be very, very hard that anybody at that point in time or from this location would have done that search. Re-identifying me from that search may not be that hard. It did not take much investigation to follow that data trail of Thelma Arnold, a 62-year-old widow who lives in Lilburn, GA. So all that connection that they made was Lilburn, GA here, Arnold name there, and then county, Georgia. Frequently researches her friend's medical ailments and loves her 3 dogs, right? Dogs is connected to here. Those are my searches. She agreed that these are the search terms that they did when New York Times actually went to this person. She said after a reporter read part of the list to her. So our searches are a catalog of intentions, curiosity, anxieties, and quotidian questions. There was the day in May, for example, when she typed in termites, then tea for good health, then mature living, all within few hours. Our query, so here is that's her. She allowed them to post the picture with the dog also. Our query mirrors millions of those captured in AOL's databases, which reveal the concerns of expectant mothers, cancer patient, college students, and music lovers. User number 2178 searches for food to avoid when breastfeeding. Number Y seeks guidance on calorie counting. Number Z searches for songs time after time and wind beneath my wings. At times, the searches appear to betray intimate emotions and personal dilemmas. Number asks about depression and medical leave. Another user searches for fear that spouse contemplating cheating. Right, it's so narrow, right? So it's kind of giving away the mood of which the user is actually searching for this, searching for these terms. Right. So that's what New York Times articles did. Very, very interesting re-identification of users. Feel free to take a look at this incident more, read about it. I put the New York Times article link and the AOL Wikipedia page, AOL search data leak Wikipedia page. So please take a look at it and we can talk about it if anything more. Let's do the next incident that happened, which is Netflix price. So Netflix also, in Netflix case, what they did was they wanted to improve their recommendation system. So they said that here is the data from us. Please find a better way of recommending movies to our viewers, and for the best algorithm, we'll actually give you $1 million or something. So this is the idea is called an open call in mass collaboration, which is if a mass collaboration, right? They had a problem, they want a solution, they just did it. Okay, I'll put it on Netflix as a competition. Let people come and participate. That's mass collaboration. Get more and more people involved. And the open call here method means that it is the problem is clear. Question is evident. Questions are very clearly stated. They are looking for the best solution. Okay, so that's what an open call open call method or a framework is. What did they give? Collaborative filtering algorithm to predict. This was the goal, to predict user rating for films based on previous ratings without any other information. So ratings is what they wanted to predict. The data that they gave was user, movie, date of rating, and the rating. Training is 100 million, testing is 2.8 million, deleting rating, inserting alternative ratings and dates, and modifying rating dates. So they did this to avoid people re-identifying, or to make sure that the users are sort of say anonymized in some sense, which is they deleted ratings, they inserted alternative ratings and dates, and modifying rating dates also. What they wanted from people participating is source code description to be submitted. Jury to decide. A set of people, including professors, were involved in deciding who's the best solution among the submitted solutions. This went on for a year. They got about 20,000 entries. Right. So that's the Netflix price part. Now let's come to the privacy part, right? Why are we discussing on this class, right? So what happened was identified records of known users. I mean, even though they deleted, they changed, they modified something, and they put it, still the users were identified, same as in the AOL case, right? AOL case also, if you remember, the intent was that they removed all the PII, but still the New York Times was able to identify that particular user. Right. Uncovered apparent political preferences and potentially sensitive information of the people who were in the Netflix data set. Right. Let's look at the paper itself a bit. I put again the link. Take a look at it. Arvind is currently a faculty at Princeton. When he did this work, he was at UT Austin, and the paper reads. The abstract in the paper reads this way. We apply. So from now on, for the next rest of this video, I'm going to go to the paper itself, show you the content in the paper itself, to walk you through the parts that I think that is very relevant for the discussion, very relevant for you to know about it. Right? We apply our de-anonymization methodology to Netflix dataset, which contains anonymous movie ratings of 500,000 subscribers of Netflix, the world's largest online movie rental service. We demonstrate that an adversary who knows only a little bit about an individual subscriber can easily identify the subscriber's record in the dataset. Using the Internet Movie database, which is IMDb, which I'm assuming all of you would know, as the source of the background knowledge, we successfully identified the Netflix records of known users, uncovering their apparent political preferences and other potential sensitive information. So, right? So IMDb. I'm assuming you have used IMDb before. In the context of either watching a movie, wanting to watch a movie, or going on rating a movie. Right, so that is the abstract of the paper. So some questions that this paper raised was is what is relevant to us in the class. Again, keep in mind the context is we are talking about anonymization, and I'm giving you examples of Netflix, AOL, all of this, but the goal is that all of this is data, and the data we are also talking about is social media data. Right? So therefore, it's very, very relevant because even social media data also has all of the things that we're talking about. How much does the adversary need to know about Netflix subscriber in order to identify a record in the data set and thus learn or complete movie viewing history? So the big question that they were chasing was, as an adversary, and keep in mind any security question, the goal is always who the adversary is and how much do they know about you. How much do they know about what context are they actually playing the adversarial role? How much does the adversary need to know about a Netflix subscriber in order to identify a record in the data set and thus learn a complete movie viewing history? So one question you can ask is that, look, does that even matter? Knowing my movie rating for a movie that I watched, like RRR or Varisu, does that even matter? Is that even personal? Is that even something that can be used to re-identify me? That's the second part that they were interested in, which is, does privacy of Netflix ratings matter? The privacy question is not, does the average Netflix subscriber care about the privacy of his movie viewing history? But are there any Netflix subscribers whose privacy can be compromised by analyzing the Netflix privacy data set? That's a one way of question that the authors have pushed it, right? Authors have put it, that is, I mean, it doesn't matter whether a normal user is worried about privacy of rating a movie, but if you can identify users on the Netflix data set only with the rating and their viewing history, I think that's definitely a concern. Right. So in the conclusions, they mention about what did they do. I've annotated some parts of it with some of my own notes, which is our de-anonymization algorithm works under very general assumptions about the distribution from which the data are drawn and is robust to perturbation and sanitization. Therefore, we expect that it can be successfully used against any large data set containing anonymous multi-dimensional records such as individual transactions, preferences, and so on. This could be social media. That's what my interest in bringing this paper for this class is. An interesting topic for future research is extracting social relationships, networks, and clusters from the anonymous records, which I think people have done. So if you look at a paper, do a search for a paper called Social Phishing by Marcus Jacobson at Indiana University. They basically did this study. If you remember, we also discussed this in the class at some point in time, where they did a phishing attack where they collected information from social and sent an email as though it is coming from a person who is connected to you, and then there was another condition or a group where they sent an email which was there was no social interactions with that person, social connection with that person. Okay, so that's about motivation for k-anonymity, motivation for anonymization, with an examples of AOL and Netflix. These are two popular incidents which motivates the anonymization. I'm sure there are other incidents also which we can think about. There's also a target example. See whether you can find, if any of you find it, post on discourse, which is there is a privacy case connected to Target target as in a company in the US, which is like a supermarket. Now let's delve deeper into anonymization techniques: k-anonymity, L-diversity, t-closeness, and differential privacy. K-anonymity. So this one is work done by Latanya Sweeney at MIT, which was part of her PhD work. Her interest was to take different data sets from different places, medical data from probably hospitals, voter record, probably from government, and say that, look, I can actually identify people if I know these, if I can get these two data sets where there is some overlapping information. In this case, it was zip, birth date, and gender. If I know this, I will be able to actually re-identify people from the data. The idea of k-anonymity, right? So let's go slowly. I think some of this will require you to sort of say concentrate a bit more. Suppression, right? Suppression is a method by which you say, even the earlier parts of this lecture, I said, let's just remove the column of address. Let's just remove the column of phone number, right? Instead of removing, you're just putting an asterisk, which is equivalent to a removal. Generalization is that replace individual attributes with a broader category, which is if my weight is 45 kgs, which is really not, I will replace it with 40 to 50 kgs. Right here, you re-identification of my weight. If it was 45, it is much higher. If you just say, look, it's between 40 and 50, then it's actually slightly lesser. Let's take this example. I took the caste to make the conversation more interesting. First name, last name, age, and caste. Raj, Shrishti, Manish, and Shrishti. Sharma, Rawat, Sharma, and Kaur, some age. Okay. So k-anonymity, the way one you can do is you can actually do suppression. You suppress it in a way that some of the tuples look very similar, and therefore you cannot re-identify the individual tuples. For example, in this case, Raj Sharma was there, right? Let's look at row 1 and row 3. This is 1, this is 3. By suppression, what has happened is the row 1 and row 3 has become very similar, right? Asterisk Sharma 25 BC, asterisk Sharma 25 BC. So I don't know whether it is Raj Sharma or Manish Sharma. That's what an anonymization method should do. The power is, as we will proceed in the lecture, you will understand what are the concerns even in some of these methods, and then we'll keep making it better and better. We'll build on the understanding that we have about simple methods of anonymization. Okay, does that make sense? Right, so it helps to anonymize the data this way. Couple of things that we need to know while anonymization, which is then columns, which is called quasi-identifier, which I'll show you in the paper also, what do they talk about. And then this idea called k-anonymity, which is k, the value of k is another thing that we should keep in mind. In this case, it is 2 anonymized, right? Which is 1 and 3 are identical and 2 and 4 are identical. If the number of tuples that you're able to actually make it similar, that's the power of the anonymization that you're getting through this k-anonymity method. Right? One another method is, make everything asterisks, right? But that's of no use. Right? It'll become useless data. The cost of doing this anonymity is dependent on the number of times you have to suppress, right? So that's how, how will you find out, how much it's going to cost not necessarily in terms of money, efforts, computation, storage, all of this, how much it's going to cost is dependent on the number of suppressions you have to make. The goal for k-anonymity is I want to suppress least because I want to keep my costs least, but I want to get maximum anonymity. Right? So that's the goal for k-anonymity. Here's another example just to get you understand the k-anonymity slightly better. So here is a table. We want to anonymize the table. And so there could be many ways. K-anonymity is also, if you'd have realized it already, you can actually suppress in different ways and achieve the same anonymization. Right? So in this case, these two are same group. If you were to look at it, 79 bond, so put them in a group. So you can just delete the row of this because it's very different. You don't really need this row, as in suppress the rows, right? The group 2 is because this is another group if you were to treat it that way. And if you were to suppress, for example, this is 53,715, this is 55,410. So you suppress most of the last 4 digits, then essentially they both become same. Here, given that it's 21,179 and this 10,179, I suppress this, so it'll become asterisk 179, asterisk 179. The bottom one, if you see the group 2, if you see 21,283, 19,482. So you can easily do this, suppress, and then the year, last digit of the year, if you suppress, they become similar. If you look at one another way you can do generalization, male, female went to human. Here male and male, and then the last one is you change the last 2 digits of the zip code, suppress it, then it helps in getting the anonymization done better, right? So that's another example, another way of doing suppression and generalization and getting the anonymized output. That's the paper. Let's just quickly, given that we understand the what they have done, let's just quickly read it. How can a data holder release a version of its private data with scientific guarantees that the individuals who are the subjects of data cannot be re-identified while the data remain practically useful? That's the goal of any anonymization methods. A release provides k-anonymity protection if the information of each person contained in the release cannot be distinguished from at least k-1 individuals whose information also appears in the release. K-1, 2 anonymized, k-1 would be 1. It cannot be distinguished from at least one another person in the row, which is what we have been talking about. If you see, it cannot be re-identified at least in one another row, right? Because this and this is very different. So there's no problem in re-identifying group 1 and group 2. You cannot do anything, right? Because the data is very different. Okay. So those are powerful, so to say, lines for the method. Other parts of the paper. So this slide and the next slide gives you details about how Latanya went about doing it. Again, I'll read it. We can see whether there's any important things that we need to emphasize. The National Association of Health Data Organizations reported that 37 states in the US have legislative mandates to collect hospital level data, and that 17 states have started collecting ambulatory care data, blah, blah, blah. Basically, medical data is getting captured. Next, the leftmost circle in the figure 1, the same figure that I showed you in the slides, contains a subset of fields of information or attributes that NAHDO recommends, which is zip code, birth date, gender, and ethnicity. Next slide also I'll show you the circles, so you'll be able to connect. So the two circles, and then there was this zip code, gender, all that in the middle, right? So medical data and voter IDs. The right side, we have to talk about the right side circle now, right? The Massachusetts, the Group Insurance Commission is responsible for purchasing health insurance for state employees. GIC collected patient-specific data with nearby 100 attributes per encounter along the lines of these. Those shown in the leftmost circle in the figure 1 for approximately 135,000 state employees and their families. Because the data were delivered to be believed to be anonymous, GIC gave a copy of the data to researchers and sold a copy to the industry. Same thing, right? Netflix, AOL thought that the data is anonymized, so they were making it public, right? Here also GIC was giving it away, and the next line says, for $20 I purchased, which is Latanya purchased the voter registration list for Cambridge and received the information in 2 diskettes. Disk, which is what the older ways of actually storing data. The rightmost circle shows that the data included the names of the name, address, zip code, birthday, gender, and each voter. That's again a voter data that she got, and which she was connecting from the right circle that we saw. Okay, so that's the circle, that's the Venn diagram with this data coming from medical data, this data coming from voter data. So one cool thing that she did was she was able to identify governor in this data, right? Governor of MA in this data, which is what is super cool and which is what probably got attention to this work. For example, William Weld was governor of MA at that time, and his medical records were in the GIC data. Governor Weld lived in Cambridge, MA. According to the Cambridge voter list, 6 people had his particular date of birth. 6 people were born in the same date as he was born. Only 3 of them are men, so 3 were ruled out. And he was the only one in his 5-digit zip code. That is, he was the only one born on the date given, male, and living in the 5-digit zip code. So she was able to easily identify Governor Weld from the data. Right. So that's what she was arguing, right? Zip, birth date, and your gender, male, birth date of Governor Weld, and the zip code. So another aspect to this whole problem is that how to safeguard, right? While access control and authentication protections can safeguard against direct disclosures, they do not address the disclosures based on inferences that can be drawn from released data. This is fundamentally the difference between security and privacy. Security, if the data is shared, and data I want to give it to you, if it is sent properly and if you receive it the way I sent it, it's probably, security is probably taken care of, which generally is also talked about CIA model, and then there is U, which is added more recently, confidentiality, integrity, and accountability, and U is usability, right? So this will help you understand what is the difference between security and privacy, right? So this will help to think about security and privacy. CIA model, take a look at what CIA is. Come back if you want any clarification, understanding of it. and I can explain it a bit more. What is confidentiality? What is integrity? What is availability? Right? So CIA stands for confidentiality, integrity, and availability. What does it stand for? How it's getting implemented? All that. So the other part of the paper talks about, so if you remember one thing that I said, right, quasi-identifier, which is the columns. The columns are actually extremely important. The ways by which you will, the cost of the k-anonymity is dependent on is the k value and the column that you're defining as where you want to anonymize it, where you want to put that asterisk. Let V be the voter specific table described earlier in figure 1 as the voter list. A quasi-identifier for V written QE is a name, address, zip code, birth date, and gender. So the columns that we define as quasi-identifier is where the k-anonymity will be applied. How is k-anonymity done? Let RT be a table and QIRT be the quasi-identifier associated with it. Columns as in the last slide, which is name, address, zip code, birth date, and gender. Those are the quasi-identifier. RT is set to satisfy k-anonymity if and only if each sequence of values in RT, QIRT appears with at least k occurrences in RT, QIRT. Right, so this we have seen as an example in the table. If you see at least, if and only if k-anonymity is achieved, if and only if each sequence of values, the zip code, suppression, all that, of values in RT table, which is the outcome anonymized table, appears with at least k occurrences. The two rows that we saw in the example group 1 and group 2, that's 2 rows, right? That's what at least k occurrences, which is 2 there, in RT, QIRT. Example of k-anonymity where k is equal to 2. So if you look at it, the two tables, the 2 rows are very similar, right? So this is any 2 rows. If you can take T10 and T11, white, 1967, male, 0213, and chest pain. We will not be able to identify if this data is shared with us, which one is the person that we are talking about, which one. I cannot identify, I cannot differentiate between T10 and T11 because they look very same. They look exactly the same, not very same. Right? So it can be trivially proven that if released data RT satisfies k-anonymity with respect to quasi-identified QIPT of all the columns that we have decided, then the combination of the released data RT and the external sources on which QIPT was based cannot link on QIPT or a subset of its attributes to match fewer than k individuals. This property holds provided that all attributes in the release table RT which are externally available in combination with something. That's how the paper reads. Right? So that just allows us to understand what these are lemmas that Latanya has put in the paper to argue that how k-anonymity is strong. But these methods are not always foolproof when the method comes out, right? Somebody writes this method, and then in this case, Latanya herself is saying that there are a few attacks that one can do on this method. But later you will see in t-closeness and L diversity, they argue about how k-anonymity is not good, why it is not good, why there needs to be better method for it. Attacks against k-anonymity. The first is unsorted matching against k-anonymity, which is says that position of the table can help identify randomized where the tuple is present. Even that can help, right? In group 1, the tuple is present in the second, can be helpful in figuring out, can have an effect on the algorithm and possibly help re-identify the row in the table. Unsorted matching attack against k-anonymity. The other one is complementary release attack against k-anonymity. I strongly urge you to go read the paper. For us, anonymity as a method, we will just talk about the next few methods and continue building on this. If you have any specific interest on these methods, take a look at the paper in detail. We have read this paper as part of our course. This paper was one of the Latanya is one of the first professors that I interacted with in the topic of privacy. Latanya used to be a professor at CMU. Now she's a professor at Harvard. And this course that she called Data and Anonymity was an introductory course that I took for the privacy idea, where I got introduced to the topic of privacy. In the previous example, all the attributes were in quasi-identifier. So this attack is that if I have some other information about the quasi-identifiers, how can I actually use it for re-identification? That is typically not the case. It is more common that the attributes that constitute the quasi-identifier are themselves a subset of an attribute's release. As a result, when a table T which adheres to k-anonymity is released, it should be considered as joining another external information. Therefore, subsequent releases of the same privately held information must consider all the release of the attributes T. So the idea is that you have to keep in mind when you release k-anonymized data of the previously released data also. Temporal attack. This one is also an interesting attack on k-anonymity, which is you have to keep in mind what data was released before to make sure that the data that you're releasing later is not helping to re-identify people in that data. Right. Either all of the attributes RT would be considered as quasi-identifier for subsequent releases, or subsequent releases themselves could be based on RT0, right? So you have to define how you're going to do subsequent releases, and subsequent releases also should keep in mind what was the algorithm used in suppression, in anonymizing in the earlier data that was released, right? So that is about k-anonymity. And limitations I've already said, lack of diversity in sensitive attributes, background knowledge, and subsequent release of the same data. So these are three limitations. Lack of diversity in the sensitive data, because the number of rows, if you take the quasi-identifier, if the cell is not very diverse, right? Let's take the zip code, it's not very diverse, then it's actually re-identification is much simpler. Background knowledge, we just saw a background knowledge attack. If I know something a priori about people in the cells, then I can re-identify people. Subsequent release of the data should make sure that the earlier release k-anonymization is actually kept in mind. Keeping all this, people developed a method called L-diversity. Given that we have spent enough time on k-anonymity, let me see if I can actually walk you through these methods, building on what we have already seen. L-diversity. L-diversity attacks this one aspect of k-anonymity, which is sensitive attributes must be diverse. The first limitation that was said here, lack of diversity in sensitive attributes. That's the problem that the L-diversity attacks, which is, look, can I get, instead of just two variety of zip codes, two different, let's take medical disease, can that list be more than two or as broader as possible? That's what L-diversity does, which is sensitive attributes must be diverse within each quasi-identifier class, which is in this case flu, shingles, acne. At least there are three, so therefore the diversity is slightly more than the k-anonymity diversity that is presented. And therefore, if you take this as one quasi-identifier, this as one other quasi-identifier groups, then I think the diversity of the quasi-identifier column is actually much higher. Okay. L diversity again, continuing, here is an example where the diversity increases, which is, in this case, it is heart disease, viral infection, and cancer. And therefore, now it is, even though all of them are same, it's going to be hard to re-identify anybody in this row. And that's how it is done in all the groups, which is cancer, heart disease, viral, cancer, heart disease, and viral. So I hope you understood that, which is from k-anonymity building to diversity is increase the diversity of the quasi-identifier. That's a paper. Here's a description in the paper which says, first, we show that an attacker can discover the values of the sensitive attributes where there's little diversity in those sensitive attributes, which we have already seen, which we probably, if it's just 2 rows, it's possibly easy to identify. Second, attackers often have a background knowledge, and we show that k-anonymity does not guarantee the privacy against attackers using background knowledge. Okay. This is the same table that I had in the slide earlier. This is the figure in the paper. So let's look at attacks on k-anonymity. These are 2 nice attacks. Let me walk you through what the attack is. Homogeneity attack and the background knowledge, right? These are the L diversity anyway are complaining about k-anonymity. Here's a nice attack, which is Alice and Bob are antagonistic neighbors. One day, Bob falls ill and is taken by ambulance to the hospital. You'll see the same table again. Having seen the ambulance, Alice sets out to discover what disease Bob is suffering from. Alice discovers the 4 anonymous table of current inpatient records published by the hospital, that is figure 2. Right? So that's the table that the hospital is publishing. Right? So this is 4 anonymous because you have like 4 rows in the same group. Right? So that's how we define the k-anonymity. That's 4, you cannot re-identify anybody in this group. Okay. That's 4 anonymous. So now that Alice has access to that table, and so she knows that one of the records in this table contains Bob's data. Because he went to the hospital, he must be there. Since Alice is Bob's neighbor, she knows that Bob is a 31-year-old American male who lives in the zip code 13053. Because they are neighbors, she knows this, and she knows this also. Therefore, Alice knows that Bob's record number is in 9, 10, 11, and 12. So if you go to the table, if you look at this table, so she's saying that it is 130 something, so it is here. And he's also a 31-year-old. So he's probably part of this group. He's not part of this group because it's 40 years. He's not part of this group because he's, for now, probably you can argue that he may be here or he may be here. Right? 130 asterisk less than. So this is, he will not be here also because this is actually age less than 30. This is greater than 40. So he's 31, so he can't be in these 2. Okay. So that's how she finds out that it is 9, 10, 11, and 12. Now, all those patients have the same medical condition, cancer, and so Alice concludes that the Bob has cancer. Interesting deduction, right? So let's do background knowledge attack. Alice has a pen friend named Umeko who is admitted to the same hospital as Bob and whose patient records also appear on the tables shown in figure 2. Alice knows that Umeko is a 21-year-old old Japanese female who currently lives in the zip code 13068. So she must be in the table less than 30 group, and 13068 zip code. Based on this information, Alice learns that Umeko information is contained in record 1234, which is what the four anonymous group 1 tuples in that table are. Without additional information, Alice is not sure whether Umeka caught a virus or a heart disease. Let me show you what that difference is. Right, so here it is 2. So she doesn't know. Alice cannot find out whether heart disease or it's viral. Look what Alice does to find out what Umeko has. However, it's well known that Japanese have an extremely low incidence in the heart disease. Therefore, Alice concludes that with near certainty that Umeko has a viral infection. Right, so that's the idea of background. Background knowledge here is this part. Right. Okay. So what does L diversity mean, right? Theoretically, the definition that I said, that the quasi-identifier cells have to be diverse, that's the way to implement it, that's the way it works, but here is a more formal way of defining it. A Q star block, which is 4 rows in the table, is L diverse, 4 diverse, if it contains at least 4 well-represented values for sensitive attribute S, which is medical, acne, shingles, heart disease, and cancer. Let's take 4 values of the sensitive attributes is well represented, well diverse, right? At least L well represented values, which could be 4. A table is L diverse if every Q block is L diverse. Okay, which is what the 4 anonymity that we talked about before. So here is an example where another method is actually arguing that what is the limitation of L diversity. Right. Here is a limitation of L diversity, right? So we said that this has to be diverse, right? Super diverse it is. And then if you see, these are groups, nicely done. So re-identification is harder. This is L diverse. This is 3 diverse, which means 3 rows cannot be identified. Zip code is anonymous. This is age. This is salary. This is disease. So it's not possible to identify anybody in this row because it is gastric ulcer, gastritis, and stomach cancer. Nothing can be done in this 3 rows. I cannot re-identify if it was you in one of these rows. Right. But here is an attack that works here, which is values within one equivalent class may have a semantic similarity. Look at this class, right? This class is what we are saying group, right? This class, if you see, it's gastric ulcer, gastritis, and stomach cancer, all relevant to stomach. And that's the attack that happens here in L diversity, right? L diversity's limitation is that it can be diverse, but if that diversity gives away some semantic meaning of the tuples, then I think it can be re-identified. I hope that makes sense, right? So which is easier to connect because the gastritis, gastric, and stomach are all related to stomach issues. So they built another method on top of L diversity to say that, look, this semantic meaning, can we take it away? Right? Can we find a way by which the semantic meaning can be controlled? So actually the limitation of L diversity is also protected, or is taken care of in some sense. A distribution of sensitive attributes within each quasi-identifier group should be close to their distribution in the entire original data set, which is, if the distribution is let's take for if there are four values in the cells, if the distribution is one has these many number of rows, another one same, another one small, another one small. Let's take if this is, or these two are same, let's take if this is how the sensitive attributes within each quasi-identifier group is, then this must be close to the distribution of the entire data, which is entire data. If I were to take, this was only one set of attributes, right? So now if I take the whole data, it should look very, very similar, right? Whole data is again the four sensitive attributes. There may be more sensitive attributes actually if you think about it. All right, so let's take that distribution is something like that. But for the ones that we're looking for, it should look very similar. If we have this done, then the t-closeness is achieved, and therefore the limitation of L diversity is removed. Okay, so again, let me repeat, t-closeness is distribution of sensitive attributes within each quasi-identifier group should be close to the distribution of the entire original data set. Let me walk you through the paper also. In this paper, we show that L diversity has a number of limitations. In particular, it is neither necessary nor sufficient to prevent attribute disclosure. We propose a novel privacy notion called t-closeness, which requires that the distribution of the sensitive attributes in each equivalence class is close to the distribution of the attribute in the overall table. That is, the distance between the two distributions should be no more than a threshold t. We'll talk about this distance. The distance is that the paper talks about is Earth mover distance. It's called EMD. But you could think of many other distance, metric edit distance, Levenshtein distance. There are many distances, methods, measures that are there. You can think of any measure. But the Earth mover's distance measure is an idea which they use, which is meaning the initial idea for EMD was if you keep throwing trash, and I'm guessing in your own cities you would have seen trash being piled and it's like a hill, right? And then the distance measure is that if there are two piles like this, what amount of distance, which is things that you have to move from one to another to get it into a shape, right? To get it into a required shape, to get into the shape that you want of both of them. Right, moving from one Earth mover's distance, moving from one to another, how much distance does it take to get a shape? And that's the threshold that the paper is talking about. Right, that's the threshold. Right, the two distributions should be no more than a threshold t. If I say that the mover's distance, for me to move from here to somewhere, if it takes 4 kilometers, I'm going to say that that threshold should be no more than 4 kilometers. So let's continue. T-closeness principle is an equivalence class is said to have T-closeness if the distance between the distribution of a sensitive attribute in this class and the distribution of the attribute in the whole table is no more than a threshold T, which we said before. A table is said to have T-closeness if all equivalence class have T-closeness. Let me show you an example that is right, so it's the same table as limitation that we saw before. So table has, so t-closeness is interesting because it has this parameter of measure, right? It is measuring the closeness at a distance, closeness or distance between the attributes, and therefore you can actually put value for each sensitive attribute that you're actually looking at. Look at this table that has a closeness of 0.16 closeness with respect to salary, right? Which is, with the measure of 0.16, you could move from one to another, right? The distance between finding the re-identifying the values. Table that is that has 0.278 closeness with respect to disease. Right? So disease is 0.278, whereas salary is 0.167. Right. So that's the t-closeness part, right? Everything, so if you look at all of this, everything is dependent on some measures, right? In this, it's t-closeness. That the threshold you can set is saying that, look, I want to actually release data for this table of medical records. I want to make sure that the closeness value is always more than some certain value when I release the data. Right? So that will help the data to be re-identified lesser. Okay. So now quickly about where all this you can see these kind of things in real world. People have started using these kind of anonymization techniques in real products. Apple is one which started looking at differential privacy as an implementation. Differential privacy is an advanced method beyond t-closeness. So k-anonymity, well, diversity, t-closeness, and then the differential privacy. So differential privacy again uses some interesting ways of figuring out how to anonymize the data with the given sensitive attributes. What I'm going to let you do is that I'm going to let you go watch a video on the differential privacy to understand what differential privacy is. It's about a 16-minute video. Take a look at it. If you have any questions, come back. But for the part of this class, I think k-anonymity, diversity, t-closeness, and knowing a bit of what differential privacy should be good. That's all I had for this week. What did we cover this week? We initially started off with how to stay safe on social media. Then we looked at different methods. First, we looked at AOL, Netflix, problems. Then we moved on to anonymization techniques. There you saw K, L diversity, t-closeness, and I've left you to look at differential privacy. Okay. Thank you for listening. See you soon.